Well, friends, you are in for a real treat today. I've tried in the past to do a little bit of the real journalism type work in research and uncovering. However, we are joined today by an actual journalist whose job it is to do the work that we just kind of do, though deeply in preparation for shows and articles. So it's our pleasure to have with us on Liberty Dispatch interview Sam Cooper. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with him and with his work, but whether you are or are not, Sam is an award-winning journalist and best-selling author. He's presented his anti-corruption findings to Canadian law enforcement agencies, officials in the Pentagon, financial and legal professionals, and academics. Sam graduated with degree in history, philosophy, and English from the University of Toronto. That's the belly of the beast in Canada, and a certificate in journalism from Ligara College before reporting for the Province and Vancouver Sun in British Columbia and Global News in Ottawa. That's the second belly of the beast in Canada. He's won a number of awards for narrative reporting, and his first book, Willful Blindness, which we're going to link to in the description, debuted as a number one seller on Amazon in Canada. Sam, thanks again for joining us. It's great to have you. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you. And I was kind of chuckling to myself with your belly of the beast references. A little story I would share is my father is from Swift Current, Saskatchewan. My family's been in Canada for generations, and his parents, I don't know if they were aspirational, but they sent him to Switzerland to the real belly of the beast, you might say. And it's a school called Le Rosé, and it has, the elites of Europe and Eurasia, So it's a real interesting story how my father went there, and I know he learned a lot of stuff, but he came back and he kind of went against his parents' plan for him to be a diplomat or a business tycoon, and he became a minister. So it's just kind of an interesting thing in my past that's kind of feeding into my whole life narrative.
Well, praise God for that.
I grew up in Toronto, and I lived there for 27 years. And when we left, I'm never going back. So, but we're not here to talk about how terrible Toronto is. We're here to talk about well, Canada is right now in terms of what's happening behind the scenes, a lot of the stuff that's going on that you've been reporting on, and you have been for a while now, all the way back, it's 2017, as far back as some of the stuff that I've read that you've covered. So for people who may not be familiar with your work, and really to set up our discussion, I think a good place to start, because this will frame where we want to go, is tell us and our audience a little bit about what you've coined the Vancouver money laundering scheme. Kind of what is it high level? Talk about your coverage of it. And that's going to really move us into a more specific discussion about stuff that's been happening really just the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it sort of fits into my life story as a young Canadian family man. I started my journalism career in Vancouver around 2006, 2007, worked my way up to the big city daily called the Vancouver Province. And so around 2010, I really started to look into how real estate in Vancouver was just insanely priced. It was so far beyond, the salaries of, it didn't matter if you're a doctor, lawyer, a hedge fund manager, you pretty much couldn't afford a home in Vancouver. So year by year, I started to learn that the influence of money from abroad, and most specifically East Asia, was tremendous on the economy of Western Canada, and specifically real estate prices. And this was, very much denied by sort of the powers that be. So real estate developers, politicians, all kinds of, powerful people in Vancouver, lawyers, casino companies eventually would deny that, money from Hong Kong and China was very important to real estate. But I was learning that it had to be huge. And, to jump to the chase, with my digging into real estate, and sort of, putting together pieces that showed mysterious people from China and Hong Kong were buying big chunks of the city. Eventually, I uncovered what's called the Vancouver Model, and this is how British Columbia regulated casinos were being used at scale to launder essentially drug money. And how it works is, everyone knows tremendous wealth is being generated inside mainland China, and yet the communist nation has these tight currency controls. But people with a lot of money, there's a lot of corruption there, there's a lot of organized crime, they're able to move their money around the world by essentially making deals with, we'll focus on Vancouver, gangsters set up in Vancouver that have all kinds of fentanyl, sales to gather cash, cocaine sales, heroin sales, crack, everything, every bad drug you can think of. Vancouver is a hub for narco trafficking. That cash is collected in warehouses, and essentially Chinese organized crime loans it out to ultra wealthy people from China coming in to gamble in government casinos. So they were literally bringing in hockey bags of cash, and the government casinos were turning a blind eye, letting them launder that money. And that's the Vancouver model in a nutshell. But, year by year, I peeled the layers of the onion back and determined how in very sophisticated ways. So we're talking about law firms, Canadian banks, again, government casino companies, real estate development, all of it is being used to launder that Vancouver model money that's coming from China and, popping up in parking lots and then step by step going into Canada's regulated economy. And I'll end my answer there because I wrote a book on it and I could talk for a while. But I tell you this, guys, I'm working on new stories and revelations right this week about new angles of this that haven't yet been uncovered. And it's shocking. In a nutshell, this is the money laundering system is related to the Chinese state and its objectives. And, I've got people at the highest levels of U.S. law enforcement and intelligence that now follow me. And basically because I've been uncovering stuff that they have in classified records and they can't really say it all, but they now treat me as a subject matter expert as well. So that's the model that is, again, back to my story. I mean, I was driven to dig into this because my generation was priced out of Vancouver. Mm-hmm. I moved away from Vancouver, and what do you know? This model is rolling out across Canada, and Canadians, are now moving to smaller and smaller and smaller cities because they can't afford homes. And I won't ramble on any longer, but, it's all about connecting dots. I'm sure you guys noticed that it was reported that a Privy Council office report came out in the final days of the election. Blacklocks broke this story, another independent journalism outlet. They said that this entity that advises the Prime Minister and his cabinet predicted a dystopian future for Canada in which people that are talented, that they pay their taxes, start to leave Canada because they can't afford to live here. And so when I look back at all of this, I really do believe I was right at the front end of a generational curve, experiencing that in Vancouver. And maybe God did put me there for a reason to uncover this model and try to tell people about why they can't afford a home.
Yeah, well, we certainly believe that is obviously the case. And sure enough, for like when you're kind of given the broad strokes of your story, obviously with this amazing journalism that you are doing, the scandal that you are uncovering, clearly you got a Pulitzer Prize. You are an award-winning journalist, and you've been awards have been showered upon you, right?
And Global wanted nothing to do with you, so you're doing the right stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the reality. That's the reality. It's amazing to me that this is the type of journalism that we need more of. This is the type of dogged, intrepid journalism that seeks to get to the actual truth of a situation that we need more of. But instead of you getting a Pulitzer, you've kind of been ostracized from, the journalism community. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. Like, what has been the response to you digging deep into this? Because I'm sure, like you said, you've been on this for years now, but you're still uncovering and untangling the thread of corruption that apparently engulfs much of the world. So what's kind of been the response? I'm super glad that you're saying people are starting to finally listen to what you're saying now, and you're a subject matter expert. But maybe you could take people along the journey of, okay, so you uncover this. What was the initial feedback that you got from the various publishers you were with, and law enforcement, Canadian intelligence? Maybe fill us in on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I can walk you right up to. In a sense, I've ostracized myself. Maybe I'll put it this way. There was a narrative that came out that, certain lawsuits start to be filed, and, I'm breaking these huge stories. Obviously a certain political party doesn't appreciate it. And, what happened was, after my book, Willful Blindness, in 2021, which Global News definitely didn't appreciate, although this is a bestseller, it was too hot to handle. It's too true. It's too sensitive. But, I break the story about Chinese election interference. Globe and Mail, in a very sort of cunning way, gets into that story, and they make some bad reporting mistakes, and that will be proven bad in the long run. But I mean, I'll backtrack. But first, I'll tell you that I decided it was time to take my, award-winning brand and go independent. So I was offered essentially, to a promotion by Global News. And I wasn't pushed aside. I made the decision that I could do better in all ways going public myself. So yeah, I've ostracized myself, I would say, because apart from, there's some great journalists in Canada, but I really don't have a good view of the whole industry. And I'll tell you why. So yeah, I pushed myself out. I turned that sort of opportunity to seek a promotion and a pay raise down. And I've been very blessed for doing so. I'll tell you that. It was a leap of faith, and it's been very blessed. But yeah, how did it get this way? Look, when I was digging into the Vancouver model, I really started to experience what, this personal and professional journey. The most rich and powerful developers in the city, by the way, who are behind Mark Carney now. There's a guy named Bob Rennie. I'll come out and name him. There was a guy named Ian Gillespie. They're called the Condo Kings. They're kingmakers of politicians. Gregor Robertson, who is now a Liberal MP, they were behind him. They were behind Christy Clark in British Columbia, behind Justin Trudeau. Everyone can read this. It's not a secret. So it won't surprise you that I'm uncovering that, sketchy money from offshore is pumping up Vancouver's economy. These guys call up my editors. They don't like me. And I've got no problem sharing that. I wrote it in my book. So
I can't imagine why, Sam.
I can't imagine why, but I mean, I start to experience this theme of I'm uncovering the absolutely dark, and I would go even further, evil underpinnings in some ways of funds flooding into Canadian urban centers, and powerful people, rich people that have gotten rich on that system, try to get me fired, in a nutshell. So look, I keep pushing out Canadian leading journalism after 2017, after I break the Vancouver Model story. I keep pushing further and connecting the dots in Ottawa about how, China, as I've said, this is a state-sponsored money laundering model. It gets worse and worse and worse when you bring fentanyl into it. I'm telling you guys, as I've told others, when we really dig into Canadian election interference, we're going to find very sophisticated Chinese proxy actors that are connected to Chinese military and intelligence, connected to Chinese transnational crime, and yet they run, above board businesses like major grocery sort of franchises. They're developing towers in Toronto and Vancouver. They have port facilities in Vancouver. And what do you know? I mean, I don't always come out and say it because it takes a while with these, I'll just call them nefarious law firms and lawyers that are in on it and are in on lawsuits. I have to be careful, but the truth will come out, and we will find that these people that are involved in the fentanyl money laundering system are involved in election interference and are surrounding some of our key politicians. Man. So this is the journey by which, look, I push stories out, and it's difficult. I'm getting hammered by lawyers. I'm getting hammered by trolls online that are connected to various parties. And that's the journey. Maybe that's another book, but yeah. Look, I'm chasing down what I believe to be the most important story in our times, maybe globally, because at the end of the day, if we get into a kinetic war with China, the brothers and sisters in Taiwan are facing that. Look, my reporting is part of that big picture. And so, in an extent, this is why people don't, my reporting has been appreciated. But at the same time, I know that within various organizations that I've been, there's people getting calls from people that don't want me there. And there's people in those very organizations that don't very, very much appreciate me as well. I'll say that.
Being a member of our audience, you most likely do research, watch videos, and read articles that contain good and true scientific and economic facts. But these would be sources that some people in positions of power would call a fringe minority with unacceptable views. The truth is, protecting your privacy as you engage in the online world should be a high priority for you. I want to help your online security with something that is actually safe and effective, and that is private internet access, the world's most transparent VPN provider. A VPN, or virtual private network, hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. So, say you wanted to donate money to a lawful and peaceful trucker protest in Ottawa, and you didn't want the Liberal government tracking you down and freezing your bank accounts. A VPN would be your friend, just as any Canadian would. Private internet access will also never record or store user data, and their no-logs policy has been proven multiple times in court and by third-party audit. It's very easy to use. Simply open up the app, click to connect, and that's it. PIA VPN is available for all platforms: Windows, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and many more. You'll also get to protect your entire household with one subscription. Our audience has access to an amazing special offer. If you sign up with private internet access by clicking on the link below and going to piavpn.com/libertydispatch, you will grab a discount of 83%. That's just $2.03 a month, and you'll also get 4 extra months completely free. I don't know if you've seen the price of eggs recently, but $2.03 a month for online peace of mind is incredible. Signing up for private internet access is risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and 24/7 customer support is available, so don't wait any longer. Protect your personal data, get out of Big Brother's sight, go to piavpn.com/libertydispatch to get 83% off private internet access with 4 free months.
And I appreciate you stepping out in faith to go independent, because I know we've all been there when you're a part of bigger institutions. There is this sort of self-censorship that remaining a part of the crowd can play in the back of your head. But being independent, being on your own like you are, it gives you that opportunity to, in your dogged fashion, chase down this story and go wherever the story goes and not self-censor. So I'm appreciative you took that leap of faith, because I think, especially given the journalistic climate in Canada, the only way you're getting to the bottom of the story is to do what you've done. Now, so I just want to say quickly, that's
that's true. We've seen this play out in the last 5 years. We've seen this play out that doctors and scientists and epidemiologists and virologists that actually wanted to get to the bottom of where this virus came from, its origin, how it made its way around the world, where all of these bizarre policies and mandates came from all of a sudden, how so quickly we developed the savior of a vaccine. People who are asking questions. And I mean, we had Dr. McCullough on our program early on. We got to chat with Dr. Robert Malone, with Stephen Petty, who's basically probably the world's greatest expert on are masks actually effective as PPE. And we get a ton of heat as well. And so there's always that. The last 5 years has shown us that people who want to dig and find out what's going on will incur the wrath of the beast, who is the state that wields not only the legacy media, but also the trollery that do the bidding of the state because they're brainwashed by all that propaganda. So this is the reality of truth seeking, is when you expose darkness, people who like being in the dark corner don't like when you shine a bright light in their eyes. And so they will lash out at you because it's uncomfortable for them to be exposed, or it's uncomfortable for them to have to admit that they were wrong, even though they at one point pushed the narrative. So we do appreciate the work you're doing. Absolutely.
So Sam, how does this money laundering scheme that you start out the economic consequences of an entire generation of Canadians around our age being alienated from just normal living, cost of living through the roof, you kind of start there. How does this then whip in and kind of fit into the fentanyl crisis that is not only happening in Canada, but that got so much light concerning Donald Trump and his recent election and kind of the demands that he put on Canada to stop their part in the fentanyl trafficking ring. So talk to us about how Vancouver money laundering scheme fits into this transnational drug syndicate operation.
It's a great question. And again, I'm working on new angles that continue to blow my mind. And it's interesting. I mean, I'm in the space where you mentioned what global intelligence or Western intelligence now says, that the virus was created essentially with high plausibility in Wuhan, leaked out, covered up. And I haven't even looked at some of the other stuff you talked out, which could be true, it could be not. But I know, because I was on the trail early, that high probability it came from China. It was weaponized. And then it leaks, and then they cover it up, and journalists and academics everywhere are just buying the narrative. So I'm experiencing going into that world and finding stuff where people want to put the tinfoil hat on you. And my job is, very carefully prove facts, look at plausibilities, and tell people, hey, there could be something else going on here. So that was just what I wanted to say about that. It's a very interesting life where I go into those areas where people are going to try to hit you and say, no way that's true. You're a nut. And sometimes you find, no, you're not a nut. So look, why I'm saying that is the fentanyl story is bigger than anyone knows yet. The way I'll focus on your question by starting and tell you where I'm going. So with fentanyl, again, this Vancouver model, everyone knows the precursors are made in Chinese factories. They're sent out around the world and in North America, Vancouver especially, also on the Mexican coast, across Mexico. China then also sends in, the factory tools, the pill presses, that, the dyes, everything is that goes into that fentanyl pill that's killing people across North America, is a product of China. It's shipped offshore, so China has sort of some deniability. And then it's made in Vancouver. It's put together in Mexico, and then it's distributed. But most important is the financial system underwriting it. So to keep it simple, look, that the powder or the precursors come to Vancouver. The pills are produced, they're sold, the gangsters collect their cash, and that cash is sitting there. Remember, they can't do anything with it. They need to wash it. And so it's a perfectly evil system for them. Again, many people trying to get their wealth out of China, and they can't because of those currency controls. So they make a deal with the gangsters. They say, I'm going to show up in Vancouver. I want to gamble and launder my money. I meet you. I get, a bag of fentanyl cash, essentially. The casino run by the BC government allows me to launder it, essentially. So the guy that wants to get his money out of China has done so. And, he transfers some money to trigger that transaction from his bank account in China to the gangster's bank account in Wuhan. So you can see how, he's made a deposit. He doesn't have to do a wire transfer to get his capital flight out of China into Vancouver. He does the deposit to the gangster, and he's paid out with that drug cash that never has to leave Canada. It's paid to him in a Vancouver parking lot. He walks into a casino and then, gambles, gets a check out, and he can buy a Vancouver condo. So that's the real estate money laundering piece. That's the capital flight piece. And look what happens. The fentanyl is sold, cash collected, and gangster gets that cash back to his Wuhan factory bank account in that transaction. So that's getting that dirty money loop going. And that's just fentanyl. What I wanted to say is, guys, I'm working on stories that it's much bigger than fentanyl. It's many, many different drugs, China, probably all. Even cannabis, supposedly, no one's saying that cannabis is necessarily harmful in itself. That's a debate. But China and these same networks that are dealing the fentanyl worldwide have now taken over legal cannabis production in North America. So there's hundreds of billions of dollars of that drug cash banked underground in North America. And China has a whole money laundering system where its gangsters, its agents of what's called the United Front, want to get that cash and move it around. So the fentanyl piece is one that's what everyone's interested in right now because people are dying, but all kinds of drugs feed into that. And it's all about China, controlling that illicit underground money, moving it around and laundering it for other syndicates from other countries around the world. And here's the added piece. That money is essentially their bank for operations also. That is, the Chinese Communist Party can use those funds in North American cities to, guess what, interfere in elections, to run operations to surveil, Christians, Falun Gong practitioners, Hong Kong democracy activists. So it's using that global narco system in many different ways.
So could you, in one sense, say that the Communist Chinese Party is the biggest drug dealer and facilitator in the entire world?
I say that, and I've said it on, probably one or two other podcasts. Why do I say that? Look, I have senior DEA sort of officials that have been studying this system for decades, and they say the CCP, that is, Communist Party officials that are running their operations around the world, are behind and essentially involved in directly this global drug trade and money laundering system. And my added piece of evidence here, I don't have to rely on unnamed sources. U.S. congressional reports are now saying that they would like to consider naming the Chinese Communist Party as a DTO, an international drug trafficking organization. And if they did so, and you can see why that would be a big hurdle to get over diplomatically, it may never happen. But if they do that, you put the Chinese Communist Party in the category with the cartels that are now designated as terror entities. So my long answer to your short question is yes, I and others classify the CCP as the largest drug trafficking organization upstream in the world.
How many people know this, Sam? Like you're saying, and I praise God for it in His providence. Well, because that you've been doing this story. I think maybe even more Canadians, more than most people, might know of it because you were located in Canada. You were so much of this has Canada right at the center of it, but I'm surprised, and maybe this will get us into kind of talking about some of the tariffs and some of the stuff that's happening here. I know Andrew wants to talk to you about that, but I'm surprised by men like Ben Shapiro. He's confused that why are we going after Canada? A lot of people are speaking about this issue as though they have no clue about anything that you have talked about.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're right. As a young reporter, I came up in the city of Vancouver, which is a global hub of this system, not only for the Vancouver model of money laundering, but Chinese intelligence essentially has a forward operational espionage node there. A story just came out about how Stanford is being so many students in Stanford, their local, I want to give some credit. The Stanford, a student news outlet broke the story just yesterday about a wide-scale university student espionage racket being run in Stanford University. And I automatically posted on X, if you think Stanford is being used, the University of British Columbia would be equally, if not more, because China has very, very intensive intelligence networks in Vancouver, also California, but the saturation in Vancouver is complete. So, how deep does this go? It goes very, very deep. And when you speak about tariffs, as I was saying, I became a ground floor expert on how captured Vancouver was. I'm telling you that capturing has rolled out across Canada. My associates are looking at Prince Edward Island, and the very same network is being used there. I have a friend who's a reporter in Maine for the Maine Wire. He's revealed how this very same system is run in Maine, in northern United States on Canada's border. Toronto, my sources say command and control for Western Hemisphere money laundering. And so I have discovered this. This is very senior people in the US government saying they know this, I know this, we're right. And Canada is being used as a command center, as a forward operational node of this activity. Why? Partly because our politicians have been bought off for decades. You could say that Pierre Trudeau sort of opened the door to this. Our laws are very weak. I start to wonder, are our laws intentionally weak? Are lawyers kind of, you could call them sort of Praetorian guard of this system, standing in the way of the legal reforms that need to happen, like anti-racketeering laws? Why doesn't Canada have that? But when you talk about smart people like Ben Shapiro saying, why is the United States sort of beating up on Canada and Mexico? Actually, he's not saying Mexico, he's saying Canada. And that's the confusing piece. I say Canada is being used in a more sophisticated and corporate way than Mexico. But if you're looking at this militarily, look, the strongest nation in the world and the home of freedom and democracy, China is trying to get at them. At the end of the day, Mexico, it looks like they have a pretty easy route. Canada, we would have hoped would be a lot more close to our longtime Five Eyes ally, United States. But I'm saying deep down, China has very deep tentacles into our political system, into our legal system, into our economic system and our banks. And so that, at the end of the day, I don't think this is a Donald Trump initiative saying, look, Mexico and Canada, I'm sorry to say it, you're either with the free world or you're being used by China. And I'm not saying that Canada is being used as much as Mexico. I'm not sure, but we're being used. And that is what's underlying the tariffs to an extent. I'm not saying Canadians should face these tariffs, but what I'm saying is, when I think about this, I'll tell you a little story. I explained to someone close to me 5 or 6 years ago when I learned that Chinese diplomats in Canada are meeting face to face with the worst gangsters in the world. The thought that crossed my mind is, why are we trading with them? If they knowingly are running these drugs into our country, our people are dying. It's at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to trade with that nation. And yet, why are we doing it if they won't stop it? Look where we are now. So you could call me a hawk. You could call me like a mean person, but I just don't. I think that Canada and the free world should be step by step limiting trade with China. And at the end of the day, I think that's what the tariffs are getting at. They're trying to reorganize global trade. And if the Chinese Communist Party is the worst force, the most corrupt force, and the largest drug trafficking operation in the world, why would you not put a wall between them and our trade?
So Trump has been banging this drum for a while. Like, I remember during his first election campaign in 2015, he was going hard on not Russia, not North Korea, but China is the real enemy. The CCP is the real threat. They are the greatest enemy globally. And so he's been on that publicly, strongly for almost a decade. And he was ridiculed for it initially. He was also ridiculed the second election campaign. I remember Joe Biden, or at least his puppeteers, kind of controlling his strings, telling him to say that China's not really a threat. And still, Trump has not let that go. Is the legitimate threat, and that would it be fair to say that part of the tariffs would be not only Trump, but I think his people around it, because you're right, this isn't a Donald Trump thing. Some of the economic advisors and people around him are the ones who are making these decisions, writing these papers, and really encouraging him to see what's happening. But do you think the tariffs, in part, we could say that this is the United States way of saying, if you're going to be our neighbor, and if we are going to engage with you in a trade arrangement, you cannot have someone who seeks our destruction hiding in your backyard. If you're going to be a good neighbor, you need to get rid of the person who's in your backyard who's trying to blow up our house. And if you're not going to do that, then you're not allowed on our property, and we need to put some barriers between us. Would it be fair to say, in part, that's what's happening with the tariffs and with Trump's interaction with Canada?
I really do believe that's it. And as I say, I mean, it's not just Donald Trump. I've talked to senior U.S. officials that have said this has been going on. This sort of step-by-step separation from China, which has kinetic plans that even I don't know what U.S. intelligence knows now. But again, this has been happening for at least a decade. The U.S. state, so Barack Obama, Joe Biden, all the intelligence agencies, the military, they have been making this what they see as an urgent pivot away from, dealing with what looks to be very, very possibly their war enemy. This is coming at us like a steam train, right? And so, as I say, Donald Trump, you can say, whatever you want about him, and a lot. He says a lot of wild things, but he's the politician that will just throw diplomacy out. And if all elements of the U.S. state know that China's the enemy, they know that America eventually has to move away from it and protect itself, he's going to be the one that has come out and undiplomatically basically said that and accelerated those plans that, again, nonpartisan people in agencies of the United States for about a decade have had this grand plan or strategy, if you will, that China's the enemy and the U.S. has to step by step, when they say you can't sell these chips or, you can't ship this and that to China. These steps have been happening for a long time. And so the tariffs are just sort of, I guess the rubber has hit the road, and now everyone in the world can look at that and say, this is very mean. or they can say, why is JD Vance flying up to Greenland? That's crazy. Or you can say, well, there's something that probably the average person doesn't understand, that the US government knows we're about that close, or they are about that close to war with China. So why would you not throw tariffs on them and sort of trip them up as they're planning to attack Taiwan? I know this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing that has been very clear to, I think, somebody who's an astute observer to what's going on, is that essentially Canada and Mexico are, we are caught up in this battle between these great giants. We're collateral damage in this war between China and the United States of America. And tariffs are essentially economic means of warfare. So instead of going live and hot with kinetic warfare like you're talking about, I think it's actually a responsible thing that they start to wage warfare against this economy that basically only exists because under Nixon we had the opening of China. And I think the world, maybe, if you want to give the benefit of the doubt, tried to enter into the opening of a relationship with China and tried to view them, give them the benefit of the doubt, view them as good actors on the world stage. But as has become increasingly clear over the last decades, as you talked about, Sam, they're not good faith actors. They're bad faith actors. In fact, it could very well be that they're the largest terrorist organization on the world who's infiltrating countries to destroy them from the inside out. When that becomes knowledge, if you're a politician, you have to do something about it. I guess unless if you're a Canadian politician, because then you ignore it. But if you're a good faith politician, like I think Donald Trump is, you have to attack it head on. And I think that's what they've done. And what's given so many people confusion is they've kept their powder dry. They haven't told everybody the plan and exactly how close you're talking about that they are to potential kinetic warfare with China. Maybe not to panic them, maybe not to panic the markets, but I do think there's some strategic ambiguity here in the way that this has been all rolled out, because they know seriously what a threat this actual situation is.
I agree with everything you said there. I mean, it to me, when you have a sense of military, when you have a sense of intelligence, everything you said is the same things I'm hearing from people in the US. And you're right. Donald, I read someone that put it together well, and they said, there's a lot of talk, of course, Trump derangement. And I'm not saying he's the best guy. I'm not saying he does some wild stuff. He said some wild stuff, but he keeps his cards close. He has smart people around him. Anyone that says Scott Bessen, the head of the Treasury, isn't one of the smartest and savviest sort of government figures in the world right now, is not an honest person. So Trump has some smart people around them. They know things that most of us don't know about what China is up to. And Donald Trump is not above sort of mischaracterizing, holding back, and even lying if it's part of his strategy. And so I do think everything you said there about economic warfare, sanctions, disruption, and Canada and Mexico being right in the line of fire, it's like you're with us or you're against us. And what I was going to add is, people in the US military and intelligence community for a long time have had the concern that Canada, and most especially the Liberal government, is not with them. So this is not just a Donald Trump sort of narrative. This is a state narrative in the United States. Nonpartisan people looking at Canada, and they're not just scratching their head. They're seeing people that are compromised. And so again, it's okay. You want to keep going down that road, and with the devil, you've been like crafting that sort of relationship since Pierre Trudeau. It's at the end of the road, right? Either we're not going to let the people that are north of us be used in a war if it goes kinetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even though there are democratic socialists in the United States and people that are communists, there still is a very strong anti-communist streak in the United States. I mean, after all, they were the opposition during the Cold War. But here in Canada, that's not so much the case. So here in Canada, you can see a total socialistic takeover in our federal government, in our institutions. And so it's not surprising that those in the United States who are not only patriotic, but really do despise communism and its effects would look at what's happening here with the influence of the CCP and shudder and be concerned with it. And I want to ask you a little bit about that. I want to focus our discussion. I want to zoom in on our newly elected prime globalist, Mark Carney. Matt and I, we have titles. Okay, so we had titles for Justin Trudeau.
A couple.
So Justin Trudeau was the prime the prime tyrant. He was the prime feminist. Those were his titles. And we didn't want to recycle those titles. So Mark Carney is the prime globalist. He's the prime climate cultist. I'm trying to think of a third one to round that out.
Marxism Carnage, yeah.
Well, as in terms of an official title, right?
Yeah,
Prime something. We're working on it. We're open to.
Can I suggest one?
Ideas.
Yes,
absolutely. What do you think?
Prime chameleon, because or the way that he gaslit, the nation, or rather, TrueAnon was always going to be in his corner. But a lot of people that maybe in their lifetime at some point might have voted NDP or Conservative were fooled into believing that Mr. Elbows Up, Jerry Butts' campaign slogan there, was going to go into the White House and and give the middle finger to Donald Trump. And everyone in this conversation, everyone in Canada knows that was a complete gaslighting lie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was
two elbows firmly down. So I want to ask you about Mark Carney, and I want to ask you about not only kind of some direct ties between the Liberal government and the CCP, but specifically Mark Carney, because I mean we call him maximum carnage, but he's worse than Justin Trudeau. I mean, Matt has said before, and I think rightly, that Trudeau is the mouth, but Carney is the brain, or at least he's closer to the actual brain than Justin Trudeau is of the operations. So I want to talk about that. But before we do, we have to let our audience know that if you want to, and one other thing before we go, I just want to make sure, Sam, you're not feeling sad and depressed and suicidal. Like you're happy and everything's good. So just in case like a news breaks that something happened to, we know that you're fine, right? Like everything's good. We'll just get that out of the way now. You look like you're doing well.
I'm good, and I train with a former JTF2 guy, and I got my head on a swivel, and I'm an athletic person. So there you go.
So we just want to make sure that in case a story breaks, everyone will know.
What a morbid thought, Andrew. Thanks. That's a great way to end our conversation.
I want to make sure he's okay. So if you want to listen to the rest of our discussion, which I know you do, because I'm sure that at least 1 or 10 things have come up that you have realized for the first time, have blown your mind. And so I expect more of that. But if you do, you have to head over to ldcanada.substack.com. You have to subscribe, become a paid subscriber. You'll get access to the rest of this interview, all our interviews. It's going to be a doozy. Sam, where can people find the book, Willful Blindness? Where can they follow your work, whether it's on your Substack or social media? Give people all that before we continue our conversation.
Yeah, so I would really appreciate people to go to thebureau.news. You see it right there on the screen. Again, this is the platform that I launched, and it's had tremendous growth over the past 2 years. I'm focusing on Canada still, but equally the United States, Fortress North America, let's call it. I'm a patriot for the Fortress of North America. My friends in the United States and Canada, we can never be separated. I do global reporting. And again, this was built on the success of Willful Blindness. You can find on Amazon. It was just back up in the top 20, I believe, in Canada after 4 years, which is like which is something.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
So I kicked myself out of corporate mainstream journalism after 20 years, after writing a best-selling book and using that as a bridge to launch, probably, I would say with confidence, one of the fastest growing new media investigative platforms probably in the world. I'm going to say that. So yeah, go to thebureau.news, 4 or 5 kick-ass strong investigative stories per week. That's where you can go and support my work. Awesome. And there's other people I'm platforming as well.
Yeah, great. Well, that's amazing.
For our audience so far, we want to say thank you for joining us. Again, head over to ldcanada.substack.com. And until next time, Galatians 5:1. Liberty Dispatch has been brought to you by SDG Media. If you want to stay in touch with us on all things Liberty Dispatch, join our email list, or support the show, head over to ldcanada.substack.com. Inflation through the roof.
Grocery prices up 11% year over year.
Censorship of dissident voices. Freezing of bank accounts.
Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers. Banks can now freeze their personal accounts, the accounts of anyone linked to the Freedom Convoy.
Digital surveillance and communism spreading.
What do we want?
Basic income!
With the basic income, I felt a sense of security because I didn't have to worry about not going hungry, and I didn't have to worry about being kicked out of my apartment.
The government is on the verge of bankruptcy, and they're coming for your money.
Is Canada's federal debt increasing in real time, now surpassing $1.2 trillion. This debt is draining taxpayer dollars, with interest alone costing $54 billion this year.
It's time to break free and start saving in money they can't take from you. Since 2013, the folks at Bull Bitcoin have one mission: destroy central banking. Bull Bitcoin is the most trusted Bitcoin company in Canada. They empower you to buy, sell, and pay bills with Bitcoin. They are 100% non-custodial, which means that you always maintain full control over your Bitcoin, allowing you to reclaim your financial sovereignty and secure your wealth for the future. Their customer support will assist you throughout the whole process, helping you get your hands on the hardest money ever created. Escape their financial gulag, click on the link below, and start buying Bitcoin today and get a $20 bonus as a listener of Liberty Dispatch.